Thanks be to God. Thank you, Linda. Again, it's wonderful to have you with us. We're glad of that. One of the most basic tenets of our Christian faith is that God is in control. Be still and know that I'm God is a famous line from the Bible. Even though there are many battles left to fight, the war has been won, and that in the end, everything will be well. And all things work together for good for those who trust God. You know, I could stand here all morning and rhyme off one-liners, but it's true. It's true. God is in control, and it's essential to our faith. And in times of turbulence, if we can understand that God is in control, it provides us a great comfort. But on the other side, there is this teaching that says that we have a responsibility to maintain control in our lives. It's a fruit of the Spirit. Do you remember that image that I've been talking about? It's an image of a tree from the book in the New Testament, Galatians, and it's this image of a tree that grows fruit. And when the Spirit of God is around this tree, the fruit that it grows is good. And one of those fruits, the fruits of the Spirit, is what Paul calls it. If you can just imagine a tree growing fruit with the Spirit of God around it, one of those fruits is self-control. It's a fruit that we can grow when God's Spirit's around us. And I think that's interesting. I mean, on this side, God's in control. Like, there's just a bigger picture that we just don't understand yet. And when in times of turmoil, it's just important for us to remember that God's in control. Be still and know that I'm God. But then God is like, you have a role to play in this too. Like, I want you to be responsible for control. More specifically, control of yourself. It's a fruit of the Spirit, self-control. So here's the biblical definition of self-control. It's the virtue, the fruit of the Spirit, as Paul reminds us, that holds our appetites in check. That's kind of the simplest definition that kind of nutshells this idea of self-control. When we were away in Cuba, do you remember back in the day when you used to be able to go to places? Do you remember, traveling? It seems like a long time ago. But we used to go to Cuba. Once a year, we went to Cuba, usually in January, and we really enjoyed it. And I remember I was running along the beach in Cuba once, and there was a little group of people around a man, and this man was feeding fish to pelicans. So there was this little crowd around this guy, and there was this one woman who noticed that one pelican wasn't getting any fish, and she was trying to tell the guy, look, this pelican here isn't getting any fish. He's being left out, which incidentally is how you can tell a Canadian in a crowd when you're traveling abroad. It's always the person that recognizes when there's no equal distribution. And so I'm jogging by, and this woman, and so I stopped, and I said, oh, I'm Canadian too. She was speaking English, which was another clue. And I said, yeah, I'm from Collingwood. And she said, oh, the Elvis Fest. I'm like, meet a person in Cuba, and they know that the Elvis Fest is at Collingwood. So I jogged back to my site on the beach, and Kimberly and Haven were there. But I was thinking about Elvis. And I was thinking about Elvis being sort of the epitome of the lack of self-control. I mean, when you think about the way Elvis moved his body, I mean, nobody had ever seen that lack of self-control before. It scared people. Like, Elvis was on the wanted dead or alive posters on churches' bulletin boards. I mean, it just scared people. And his singing voice was just this kind of, there was just no control to it. And it moved other people into losing control of their emotions and of their bodies. And it was just almost like this scary thing that Elvis had. And many people just said, that's liberation. I mean, let's get out of these straitjackets we've been living in. Because now we realize that we don't need to be controlled in those ways. Well, if you know anything about Elvis, you know that his appetites just got out of control, and that's what killed him in the end. So ultimately, there needs to be a balance. Ecclesiastes 3, in the Old Testament, says that there are gifts that God brings into our lives, and they're good things. Ecclesiastes 3 says that God wants us to be happy. It's God's desire that we be happy. And so God fills our lives with different gifts. But we know that without self-control, some of those gifts that were originally beautiful things can turn into vulgar and ugly things. Sex, for instance. Sex. Sex is a beautiful thing. Any Christian would say that sex is a gift from God. And it allows people to be intimate with each other, and it gives us pleasure. But when a certain line is crossed, then what begins as a beautiful thing ends in something that destroys lives. What about keeping our bodies in shape and working out? A healthy, fit body is just a gift from God. We have these incredible bodies. And if we can learn to keep them fit, it's a beautiful thing. But not if we're working out 12 hours a day. Not if bigger is never big enough. And not if we never have time to speak to our children because we're always working out. What begins as a beautiful thing without self-control becomes something destructive. What about money? When money is used the way that God wills us to use money, it transforms communities, it changes lives, it gives people what they need to be happy. It's a beautiful thing. But we know how seductive money is. There's nobody part of this worship today that doesn't know how seductive money can be. And so when we cross that line with money, it becomes something that's destructive. You can think of other examples. Eating is a great gift from God, but when eating gets out of control, it's a destructive thing. So we think about this definition, the virtue that holds our appetites in check. It implies that there needs to be some kind of power, some kind of force that is able to hold our appetites in check. And so I just want to take a look at the biblical meaning of self-control. This is the fruit that's listed in Galatians 5 when Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. When God's surrounding our lives and when His Spirit comes up alongside us, this is what we grow in our lives, self-control. And as we start to look at self-control and what it means biblically, we realize how much we need it in our lives. And what lays at the heart of all of this, according to many sections of the Bible, but more particularly in Galatians 5, is that there are two natures within each of us. There's the natural self, what Paul calls sin, and then there's the spirit side, which is what Paul calls the God side. And these two natures within each of us are constantly, daily, at conflict. An image for this is the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. That's a biblical image because that's essentially the picture that the Bible paints. We have these two, there's the carnal part of us, which always doesn't see eye to eye with the spirit part of us. And so there has to be some power that helps us control our natural selves. And so there's this story from Genesis 4 that Linda read. It's the first book of the Bible. It's the story of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, according to that narrative, are the sons of Adam and Eve. And in that story, there's something that we can learn about self-control. The story is more specifically about anger and how anger can get out of control, but it relates to all the other areas that we need to practice self-control in. So here's a bit of the text. Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions, from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. And so Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So what Cain did was he sort of half-heartedly brought some of what he had. And what Abel did was he brought the very best of what he had. But that's not really the point of the story, that God looked with favor upon Abel just because Abel brought the very best of what he had. More to our point here, it was that Cain wasn't remorseful at all. Like, Cain could have made a choice and just said, I'm sorry that I didn't bring you the best of what I had, God, but he didn't make that choice. Instead, he just became angry and jealous. He wasn't remorseful. And then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast?" There is this huge why question here. And God was just asking Cain to look into his own heart. Cain had a choice. He could have chosen remorse, which is to put ego behind and not before, but he chose anger. Why are you angry, Cain? I'm angry because I didn't get what I wanted. Well, what did you want, Cain? I wanted to be number one. I wanted you to call me the best God. But why, Cain? Well, because I guess I care more about myself than I do about my brother. Which reveals this truth, that so much of our anger and our problems around any kind of self-control grow out of our preoccupation with ourselves. It grows out of self-absorption. And so in this story, God warns Cain that he's about to make a terrible mistake. And here's the warning. If you do what is right, in other words, you have a choice here, Cain. He's talking to you, he's talking to me. If you do what is right, you'll be accepted. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you. Now, this is a warning. That's what this is. It's a warning. Oftentimes, we confuse warning with threat. Oftentimes, we think, I'm warning you, and it's an aggressive, destructive thing. Please don't confuse warning with threat. A warning is almost always made out of love. When we warn somebody about something, it's because we care about their well-being. When you raise kids, you give them warnings all the time because you care about them. Don't go near the street because there are way too many cars going fast. It's dangerous. You're giving them a warning. And a warning also reminds us there are consequences to our actions. That's just the way life is. If you smoke 2 packs of Demoriers a day for 40 years, there's going to be consequences. If you eat poutine for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and never go anywhere near fruit and vegetables, there's going to be consequences. So I'm warning you. A warning is almost always set out of love. The motive for a warning is love. And so here's the warning to Cain that God gives, and to you and to me. It's just as relevant today as it's ever been. If you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you. Isn't that a picture? Sin crouching at your door. I blogged about this, but do you ever see that show When Animals Attack? I know, I hope you've never seen it because it's just ridiculous. It's kind of like the scene might be a petting zoo, and there's some big animal in the petting zoo that's supposed to be tame, but then he just snaps and goes on a rampage. And there's just one clip in particular that I remember seeing. It's kind of ridiculous, but it forms an image for us. It's like the family at the family cookout, and they're in their backyard. And they're having the barbecue. And their family pet lion is laying there, kind of and they've raised him since he was a cub. You know where this is going to go already. And Uncle Harry's at the barbecue. And Uncle Harry's just having fun, enjoying a few pops. And then Uncle Harry says something, and Mango snaps and attacks Harry. And then people come to interview the family after, and the family's like, I don't know what happened. Mango's never done anything like that before. And the interviewer says, well, what do you think happened? And they're like, I just have no idea. And I'm watching the video going, I know what happened. Mango's a lion. That's what Mango does for a living. Like that's his nature. So don't be surprised when Mango snaps and attacks someone at the family cookout. It's an image, this image of sin crouching at your door. There is this danger of our own nature, and this is what the Bible calls sin. It's our own nature crouching at our door, and it needs to be controlled. The author Greg Massey wrote this: "There are two natures that beat within my breast. One is foul, one is blessed. One I love and one I hate. The one I feed will dominate." It's a warning, but it's spoken out of love. A while ago, there was an Ann Landers piece. You remember Ann Landers? Did you know that Dear Abby was Ann Landers' sister? Did you know that? Actually, there's some speculation that they were the same person. Conspiracy theory. Well, she had some good advice, Ann Landers, and listen to this. This was a letter that Ann Landers got. "Dear Ann, I have a problem. I'm happily married to a wonderful wife. We have 2 children, but I have also been seeing another young lady for the past 6 months, and my problem is that I love both of them. What should I do? Signed, Confused. And P.S., don't give me any of that morality stuff." Well, here is Ann's response. Here's what she writes back. "Dear Confused, the only difference between animals and humans is morality. I suggest you consult your local veterinarian." Not bad. If you say, "I don't know what came over me. I just couldn't help myself. I just lost it. I don't know why, but I just did that. I just had to do that." What you're saying is that you need self-control in your life. We all do it. We need something to control our nature, and often we try, but we fail. And we just can't seem to find the resolve to control ourselves. And what the Bible says clearly is that we cannot do it on our own. When Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit being self-control, he's reminding us that it's not a fruit of the self, it's a fruit of the Spirit. We need help from a greater power to control ourselves so that we don't run into destructive things. Well, Cain ignored the warning. Cain could not control his anger. And Cain killed his brother Abel. And there were consequences at verse 10. The Lord said to Cain, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to you from the ground, and now because of your anger, you are under a curse and you're driven from the ground." There's consequences to not being able to maintain control of ourselves. And we don't want that. We don't want that for our loved ones. We don't want that for ourselves, for the sake of our loved ones. And so the Bible just gives us a warning. And the Bible promises that there is a power in this world that Jesus called the Holy Spirit that can help us. And when Paul consistently points back to the empty tomb, Paul is saying it's the same power that created the heavens. When you leave this world and you go to heaven, this is the power that created that new place. Paul says this is the power that raises up the dead. Paul says the same power is with you today and will help you. And in this particular case, it will help you find this gift of self-control, this fruit of the Spirit. And it will change you. And Paul said it will change you so much that people around you will notice. People around you will notice that you're changed in the way you live and in the words that you speak. And so Jesus just gives us all this invitation. I'm right here. I'm always here. I'm standing outside your door. I stand outside the door of your life and I knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him. and he with me.